Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Appreciate everybody being in here. So, last week, Fitz, the college football playoff, we've got our final two, and I think that ESPN / the SEC, I think they are, but I don't think they're beside themselves. I think it's kind of a mixed bag.
Right.
They're not happy that an SEC or one of those smaller Southern schools, as Kirk Herbstreit said, is not in it. But I think they're willing to ride the coattails of these ratings because this is going to be a massive, massive number for Ohio State and Notre Dame, because for both teams, Fitz, it's either you love them or you hate them. And either way, you want to watch either of them win or them lose. There's no in between when it comes to these two teams. I think a lot of people are going to tune into this thing. So we're going to dive into this on how ESPN / the SEC feels about it. So I appreciate it, everybody. Before we do, again, remember, like, follow, subscribe, continue to hit that notification bell. Seems like Fitz got something here. He's got the lights. He's turning on the lights for us. He is on air. He wasn't on air before, and now he's on air. I love it. I love it, Fitz. So, look, national championship game. It's Notre Dame, Ohio State. Two of the biggest brands, not just in college football. These are two of the biggest brands of sports. I mean, Notre Dame especially. I got to believe that ESPN's got to be a little bit happy. We were giving Kirk Herbstreit a hard time, and he deserved every bit of it. But I think he's telling the truth as far as, hey, these are two big brands. People are going to watch this football game, so the ratings are going to be there. Will this tone down any rhetoric from ESPN on how the SEC, will it tone it down at all, Fitz?
Well, let me thank ESPN. I know I'm thanking ESPN, Brien, for bringing us together, unifying this country in a way I didn't think was possible. All of us are happy Notre Dame's in this game because it's not an SEC team. They have actually brought the SEC above the national hatred of schools such as Notre Dame and Ohio State. And my personal family Ohio State hatred is because my family's from Michigan. And I'm happy these two teams are in the national title game because that's what ESPN has done to me. They made me a better person by spreading out my hate from just a few schools to an entire conference.
Right.
And I think that's made me better, less focused on specific hatred and more general hatred of the entire substance of the SEC. I do like the fact that neither one of these schools has a contract with ESPN, and they're kind of just like hedging in here, pushing in because they have the contract for the playoff. These aren't their schools. They weren't worthy of being on ESPN. And here we are. They're going to get great ratings. How do they explain that? That without the SEC, college football can go on. It's incredible. Right. It's the most unifying moment in this nation's history.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that, and this is 2 years in a row because last year was Michigan and Washington.
It's so bad.
And this game is going to crush that game.
Yep.
It's going to crush it because as big a brand as Michigan is, Notre Dame is bigger, and Ohio State is infinitely bigger than Washington. So it's going to crush that game. I think it's good for everybody. We've talked about this on multiple occasions, and we'll continue to talk about it, is that the multitude of talent in this country when it comes to college or college football players, the parity has been spread out. And that means we've got different teams that can qualify for this tournament each and every year and qualify to be in the national championship game, different ones each and every year. Now, I know that that's not what SEC fans want to hear. I know that's not what ESPN wants to hear. But for the majority of the country, that's exactly what we want to hear. That's exactly what we want to see, that it's not always the same teams every single year, no matter what. We want to see other teams get in this thing and have an opportunity to win it. Now, that doesn't mean that there's teams that maybe shouldn't have been in and teams that should have. I get it. But at the same time, having different names is a good thing for college football, regardless of what they're trying to tell you. And if you're going to tell me that ESPN doesn't believe that having Notre Dame and Ohio State in the national championship game isn't a good thing, they're full of it. They're absolutely lying. Of course it's a good thing. It's a good thing for college football.
Right.
Look, hate Notre Dame all you want, Fitz, and a lot of people do. But Notre Dame being good is good for college football. I'm sorry. It just is. I mean, when Notre Dame is relevant, number one, people watch just for the reasons that I said earlier. Either you love them or you hate them. People are going to watch, but it's good for college football. Ohio State being good, I don't know if it's necessarily good for college football the way that Notre Dame is, but it's good to see them in it because they're a big brand. They're just a big brand. I mean, Ohio State is, and Ohio State, it's good to see them bounce back. For me personally, as a former player, it was good to see them bounce back because they went through some trauma, Fitz. Losing the way that they did to Michigan and everybody was distraught. Lord, I mean, I don't know that I've seen a team when their season isn't over go through that kind of trauma. They went through some trauma. And for them to be able to put that behind them and move forward says one thing about their coach. Everybody was trying to fire Ryan Day, myself included. And for them to be able to move forward and put that all behind them, what they have in that locker room from the coaches on down clearly is something special. So I'm glad that happened to them.
That's what the difference of a 12-team playoff is.
Yeah.
I mean, that Michigan loss would have put Ohio State on the outside of the 14 playoff.
Yep.
And I know some people are saying now conference champions aren't playing for a national title, blah, blah, blah. We respected that in baseball and basketball and the NFL, that you don't have to win your division, your conference, whatever, to win the Super Bowl. We've accepted that. I don't know why some people see that as a barrier to enjoying this. This is awesome because, yeah, you have to prove yourself over the 12-game or 13-game season if you're in the conference championship to prove you're worthy of being in the playoff. But then you got to play the games. You got to earn the spot in, and then you got to play the games. And here we are, two teams that, based on these rankings, would have been 5 and 6 in a 14 playoff.
Correct.
Now, you can make the argument Notre Dame would have been 4 if you had seeded for a 14 playoff. That's kind of a problem, though, right? Oh, we're doing 4. Well, this team's better than that team. We're doing 5. We're doing 12. Okay, they can be 5 or 6. You know that kind of bothers me. But they did say they were going to reward losing teams in the conference championships because you made the conference championship. I don't know if I feel that's right, but the fact is, if you apply these rankings and how they're laid out and take out the 2 top 4 seeds that were there because they are conference champions, Arizona State and Boise State, these teams would have been 5 and 6. Wouldn't even have been in. Folks, that's great for college football. Not having SEC teams in again, that's great for college football. These things are incredible for college football. And the day we get a Boise State or a UNLV or I don't even know who else is out there because so many of these great programs have been moved up, like Cincinnati and UCF. They now have an opportunity to be at the power table. But when we see those teams get into the 4 or maybe even get all the way into the finals, I don't see that happening in the short term. It's going to be great for college football. It may not be great for the initial TV ratings, but to grow the brand, you need to extend. It's like a workout. You got to put in the price and have the pain. I don't know what a workout is, by the way. Then you'll achieve your goals. And I think expanding the college football brand should be all of our goal, but it's clearly not ESPN's. ESPN is centrally focused on SEC, even to the detriment of the ACC and Big 12, which it has skin in the game with. which is bizarre to me. If college football isn't about the SEC, I don't think ESPN at its core is happy, because it's just about money to them. They don't give a damn about you. They don't give a damn about the game. They don't give a damn about the history. They want to have profits. And I think that's true of any business entity, but in the past, we didn't let that trickle down to the talent.
Correct.
They weren't ordered to say things, coached to say things that benefit our broadcasting brand over reality, over the entire game. And that's where ESPN is really running afoul with college football fans.
Yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's exactly the issue, is that they have chosen profit, which, again, everybody chooses profit as a business. That's the number one goal to starting a business. I get that. But when you let it trickle down and affect other aspects in the business, that's where it becomes a problem. And then they've done that. My thing is, where do we go from here? It's like, this is 2 years in a row. Are the tides turning? Will ESPN say, okay, you know what? Maybe we need to ease up a little bit on the rhetoric, Fitz. Maybe we need to say, oh, well, maybe the SEC, yeah, they're great, but there's other great football teams. Maybe we need to pile on that. Are they just going to say, no, these are one-offs, and it's going to get back to being this dominant conference, and all these teams are just that much better than everybody else? Or are they going to flip the script? To me, it's interesting because, like I mentioned, it's 2 years in a row. And you could say last year, well, they kept Georgia out and they were the more dominant team. Hey, don't lose to Alabama and you don't even have to worry about all of this. So clearly you weren't the more dominant team. I don't want to hear it. But this year, Georgia wasn't even close to dominant. There was no dominant team in the SEC. We all knew it. And except for ESPN kept trying to plug it down their throat. Lane Kiffin kept trying to push it down our throat. And nobody, and I think a lot of people wised up to it and just said, yeah, not so much. Not so much. I need more proof. And the proof's got to be on the field, because what I'm watching on the field is different than what you're telling me. So I think the more the nation is starting to, not that we weren't awake before, but again, when you're fed something for so long, you start to believe it. Now people are like, well, hold on. This is not what you're telling me. What I'm watching is different than what you're telling me. And I'm watching these teams. I'm like, you're losing to them. You're not superior. And even if you were to win, let's say Texas wins that game, were they the superior team to Ohio State? No, they were on the same playing field. You could say the same thing of Arizona State. Were they superior to Arizona State? Absolutely not. They won the football game, though. That doesn't mean that they were just, they were superior to them. No, they weren't, people. They weren't. And that's what's starting to happen in college football. I love it. I go back to your point real quick, Fitz, where you mentioned that we've accepted it in baseball, the NFL, basketball. We've accepted that you don't have to win, your conference or your division to go play for a national championship. It'll get to college football, because remember, for so long, that was the barrier. That was just the standard. Hey, you win your conference, clearly you're the best. You go play for the national title. Well, now that we've opened it up to more teams, it'll get there. Look, I wasn't around. I was around, but I don't remember the March Madness. There wasn't always 64 teams in this thing, and you had to win your conference even to get invited to go to the NCAA. You could have been a really good team, but you lose, let's call it 2 games in your conference. You didn't get to go. And people accepted, okay, you know what? We're inviting all these teams. You don't have to be to win the national title. Oh, also, if you do happen to win the national title, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best team either. It just means that you had the best luck. It means that you had the best matchups, and we'll start accepting that in college football. And I think that's where the SEC is going to take a nosedive with viewers, because you keep talking about, oh, we're the superior conference, then just win the national title every year. But if you're not, I don't want to hear that.
Big B, this is almost like corporate narcissism. Oh,
Yeah.
don't believe what you're looking at. No, listen to us. We're the arbitrators of truth and reality, even though what we say doesn't line up with what you think is going on. You're wrong. The
Correct.
SEC is still better. They just had a bad season. But overall, it's better. Look, I mean, let's just stop this. Let's stop it. And let's lay it out as it is, Big B. The SEC is the best football conference from top to bottom. It is.
Yep.
But it's not the best football conference by a mile.
No.
By a large amount. And that is the story that ESPN has not only told us for the last 10 plus years since this 14 playoff came to be, that in reality, if we want to put the best teams in, it probably should be the Big Ten champion and 3 SEC teams. That's been the storyline pretty much from the start from ESPN on this situation. And because of that, they created this narrative that if you wanted to play for the national title, you had to go to these schools. And I've said it before, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy that only the best players went to the schools they deemed worthy of going to because they were the only ones getting the real shot to play for a national title. So I say this, Big B, we're at 12 schools now. I think we all agree this didn't quite work as smoothly as we wanted. Some want to go back to 8. I don't think you can go backwards. I just don't. I think the only way is to go forward and go to 16, get rid of the buys. Everyone has a home game that deserves one. Let's move forward. And here's what all I want. And it can start with this year as the first expanded playoff. Give it 10 years. Give it the same time. Give this expansion, whether it's 12 or 16, the same amount of time you gave 4. And let's see what happens to college football from top to bottom. Because ESPN isn't going to like it.
No.
They've wanted to consolidate their power, and they've wanted to literally put the SEC above everyone else by creating a whole different conference, a whole different level of play, I should say. And they'll invite in the Big Ten because everyone needs their Washington Generals. They have to have someone to play, but the SEC will dominate that. You see, this has all fallen apart so quickly. Have you heard anyone in the last month talking about that super conference, Big B?
Nope.
No, it isn't tangible. It's not reality. It was a narcissistic corporation named ESPN trying to create an alter reality and forcing us to believe it's true like any narcissist will do in a relationship. The bad news for ESPN is whenever someone sees through the narcissism and understands how they're being manipulated, they end that relationship, they move on, they learn from it, and the narcissism has to cease or just become ridiculous. And that's ESPN's position now. They're literally, as a corporation, from the talent that's on air to the leadership, asking, what the hell are we going to do here? How are we going to spin this? I guess we're just going to ignore it. And I do want to know, how many times will they mention the SEC in this game? Because it has no purpose of being mentioned in this game. But I have a feeling it'll be more often than we want.
Yeah, something will happen where they'll bring it up, which will be absolutely ridiculous. And I know there will be plenty of us that are going to call it out because it has no purpose. It has no bearing on anything. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I just think that ESPN has pigeonholed itself into something that it didn't need to do. I get it. I get why, but they didn't have to. And I think if they just embraced college football in itself, to me, I think they could have gone further. And they still can. There's still time. I think that if they just say, you know what, we get it, and kind of come at it from the attitude that both me and you are coming at it from. The SEC is clearly the best conference from top to bottom. But it's not just this superior to where nobody can compete, nobody can beat them. If they just come at it from that angle, I think that would work best. But for some reason, they have refused to do that. And they've gotten their talent on board to do that. And now their talent is starting to look ridiculous when they do that. Because, again, people are starting to figure it out, Fitz. People are starting to say, no, not so much. We're watching the games. And what you're telling me, I mean, look, I just go back to Lane Kiffin, where Lane Kiffin said it's the SEC and a few Big Ten teams, and then everybody else, the ACC and the Big 12. And yet you can't beat them when it counts. I'm just trying to figure all that out. You keep losing these football games. I don't understand, but I think I do understand. It's just what I've been saying all along. The SEC is the best. It's top heavy. It's not that superior to what it was. Was there a time, Fitz, when maybe it was superior? Yeah. But that was 5-6 years ago.
Right.
Maybe even longer, but it isn't right now. I can assure you that it isn't right now. And people can point to how many national titles they won out of 20 years, but it was the same teams. It was Georgia. It was Alabama. You throw in an Auburn. You throw in a Florida, and you throw in an LSU. Well, there's a bunch of teams in the SEC. The other ones weren't competing. The other ones weren't doing, like Tennessee. Tennessee wasn't doing anything. They weren't competing for national championships. Oh, and by the way, they didn't compete for one this year anyway. They didn't compete for one, regardless of whether they were in the 12-team playoff or not. They weren't competing for no national championship. So that's what I'm talking about. It's like the reality just doesn't mesh up to what we're being told. And I think people are just tired of it. I think they're ready for ESPN to get back to reality because, look, I'm not going to get political, and that's why certain people don't like ESPN. But the majority of people don't like ESPN because of the rhetoric that they put out.
Yeah.
That's why they don't like them, is because you're trying to feed us a line of bull that doesn't match up with what we're actually watching. And we would love your programming if you just got back to reality versus an agenda. You don't have to have an agenda. We'll watch. Just make it be fair and tell us that it's fair. Tell us it's equal. But they're not going to do that. And I think I still believe there's time, but maybe they think it's too late, Fitz. I don't know.
Yeah. I think now the P in ESPN doesn't stand for programming, it stands for propaganda. Yeah. They've completely changed their business model on us. But Big B, this is all a net effect of the unintended consequences of the NIL and transfer portal. We thought it would solely be the rich getting richer, and in some ways it has. Both teams in the championship game have 1-year transfer portal quarterbacks. So that's pretty interesting. One came in from Kansas State, one came in from Duke. They're playing for the national title. So in some ways, the portal has allowed a consolidation of talent. Honestly, I mean, I cover Kansas State. Will Howard would not be playing for a national title right now at Kansas State. He just wouldn't. That might come because now with the portal, we're seeing a different kind of trickle down than what we expected. We're actually seeing a starting quarterback from the biggest brand in the SEC as we sit here now leave to go to the ACC. What? Yeah. That's not how it was supposed to work.
No.
The consolidation of talent was supposed to be up into the SEC. And we're watching talent now bleed out of the SEC into college football, and the ramifications aren't immediate, but they're noticeable. They're not some kind of huge shift, but there's a shift. And it's going to be kind of, like a tide. You're not going to really notice it, but you're going to look back and say, hey, look where we are now. And the tide has turned. And as this continues down this pathway, I think we'll see ongoing improvement, the closing of the gap, shall we say, between the elite, including the SEC, and everyone else. And right now, the closing of that gap is represented by two incredible brands that weren't deemed worthy of being good enough for ESPN. And this is going to be a fun process. It's not going to take a year, but again, can we have 10 years of this like you gave the 4-year playoff 10 years to impact the game in a way that we didn't want and you manipulated? Now we want a payback, 10 years of something different when everyone could benefit. I don't think they want it. I think they will start pushing for something different, although it's hard to deny they've had great TV ratings for the games that they've had that even weren't SEC teams. This has worked. This has been brilliant. Has it gone exactly like we expected? No, we thought home field would be a small advantage. It was huge. Buys would be an advantage. They were a detriment. But let's work on perfecting that instead of going back to what ESPN, I'm sure, deep down would like, even though they're probably making some pretty good profit from this, even though they bid a lot of money. We'll see how ESPN reacts to all this in the offseason. But we ain't going back, fellas.
No.
Just know that. All of you at Disney headquarters, we ain't going back. And if you want to keep pushing this narrative, it's only going to get worse. There has been a rebellion in college football fandom.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, I love it. I love the direction. Look, everything needs a tweak. And so the college football playoff obviously needs that, but it doesn't mean it needs to go away. It just tweak it so it can be better. And there's certain ways that it can be better. We can talk about that at a different time. But I love what's going on. I love that Notre Dame and Ohio State are in this football game. I love that the ratings are going to be gigantic and that ESPN is basically going to piggyback off of two brands at one conference, another one that's not even in a conference, that they're going to piggyback off of this to make money, when all they've told us over the last decade is that these teams, that where their conferences not worthy of who we want to represent. I think that is absolutely hilarious. So appreciate everybody watching. Thank you guys as always, man. Tomorrow we're going to do Big 12 power rankings, end of the year power rankings. I was pushing it off. Well, it's time to do the end of the year power rankings. Probably not going to be a ton of surprises. I think we know where everything kind of sits, but make sure you guys tune in. And we're also going to start diving into basketball. There's some really good Big 12 teams playing basketball. Iowa State is absolutely incredible, people. If you haven't paid attention, pay attention. Iowa State is incredible. So we'll get back to all of that this week. So appreciate you guys. Again, thank you as always. Aloha, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.